The history of the US Open Cup. It's an alternate way of understanding the entirety of US men's football history. The cup itself, yes, neglected, allowed to become a football in Grey Gardens, and now possibly kneecapped. And I don't know if you saw the Friday evening news dump that announced that only 8 of a possible 26 Major League Soccer teams will actually even take part in the 2024 edition of the 110-year-old Open Cup. And yes, in case you're wondering, last year's finalists Inter Miami will not feature. Don't shut us out of our beloved Leo MLS. And besides those 8 first teams, 11 other MLS clubs will send their next pro sides. Essentially, their third division youth squad. Think of it like this. It's a bit like going to the Willy Wonka experience in Glasgow, expecting to meet Timothée Chalamet himself, and instead being greeted by a short walk around an empty warehouse, a couple of jelly beans, and a visit from the cops. It's a gut punch. And frankly, as I said, kneecapping to a competition, a once glorious competition that's currently struggling for relevancy and its very survival. Let's recap how we even got here. The US Open Cup is the oldest football competition in this nation. Think of it as an American version of the FA Cup, a single elimination knockout competition with any and all clubs at any and all levels welcome. First kicking off back in 1913. Yes, that's a good 7 years before the NFL itself was even founded. And in the first final, May 1914, over 8,000 people paid the princely sum of 25 cents each to attend at Coates Field in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, to watch the Brooklyn Field Club beat neighbours Brooklyn Celtic 2-1. Feisty. And the trophy that the victorious Field Club lifted was called the Dewar Cup because it had been donated by Sir Thomas Dewar, the first Baron Dewar of the family you probably know from their Scotch whisky. And the giant of the early year was Bethlehem Steel, a vaunted outfit who won 4 of the first 7 tournaments. Another club with a record 5 total US Open Cups, the Fall River Marksmen. Oh, that team, that history, that heritage, they just don't miss. And the player with the record most cups won as an individual is the quite legendary Billy Gonsalves, a centre-half who was known as the Babe Ruth of soccer, who lifted 8 trophies with 4 different teams. And when I think about the Open Cup and the rich, meaningful history of the sport we adore in the nation we love, I do think of Billy Gonsalves, and I think also of a gentleman called Gene Olaf, who, when US soccer itself turned 100 in 2013, was then the oldest living US men's national team player still alive. He was in his 90s then, and I went to visit and write about him to understand the times in which he grew up and the football culture in which he thrived. Really to draw from his memories. He lived in New Jersey, fascinating bloke, a lovely man. He'd been a highway patrolman after his football career. Dude still lived on his own with a dog called Donovan, yes, after Landon, and his memories of football in this nation were all about the US Open Cup. I had no idea, but he talked wide-eyed about just how much that trophy was coveted by the maze of contending teams around the nation, especially around New York's highly competitive ethnic semi-pro leagues. He actually played on a Jewish club called Hatikva, and then became the starter for a regional power, Brooklyn Hispano, which the New York Times described as a club, quote, of Spanish-American origin. And Olaf laughed when I read him that description. That's not true, he shouted. We had Irish, we had English, we had whoever was the best and could win a lot of games. And it was on that Hispano team Olaf actually lined up alongside the legendary Gonsalves. He told me when Billy took a shot, that ball moved like no other I've ever seen. And he showed me the ball. It was like a bloody cannonball, and I quaked for this man. And he shut his eyes as if still traumatised by the experience. Olaf won his first US Open Cup on the eve of the Second World War in front of an enormous sold-out crowd at the New York Giants Polo Grounds. These are the memories. These are the stories. This is the heritage we're in danger of bulldozing alive. Stories of people like Hans Gudegast, a fullback for Maccabi Los Angeles, happened to be the son stay with me here, of a German Nazi Party member, and was so proud in his life to play for a mostly Jewish team who took the field with a Star of David sewn onto their jerseys. The club was actually formed by a group of Holocaust survivors. Hans scored penalties in the semi and the final games of the US Open Cup as Maccabi won the 1973 title. First of 7 times they made it to the big dance between 1973 and 82, winning it 5 times. You may know Hans by his stage name, Eric Braeden. It is printed on his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, in part for his 44-year stint as Victor Newman on The Young and the Restless. I like to think he got a Hollywood star for his US Open Cup penalties, but shortly after Maccabi's epoch, the Open Cup began its decline. First, the NASL. Yes, that great tournament featuring your Pelés, your Beckenbauers, your Cruyffs. They shunned the competition, and it became a purely amateur affair for 45 long years. That came to an end in 1995 when the USL and a year later MLS teams signed up, culminating in a final watched by 35,709 people live with their own eyes in 2019 as Big Bad Bull Brad Guzan, that king, lifted the trophy with Atlanta United. But the truth is, the US Open Cup is in another snake belly low. US Soccer have self-admittedly struggled to grow the tournament commercially, and from a broadcast perspective, it is nowhere near where it should be. Tarnished, faded, struggling just to find sponsors or even a broadcaster. Many games are only aired on US Soccer's YouTube channel. And at the same time, Major League Soccer, they've launched a myriad of their own tournaments, like the Leagues Cup, that they own in their entirety, own and control and profit from. So from their owner's perspective, they're tired of carrying the US Open Cup financial burden. MLS Commissioner Don Garber himself said MLS has been, quote, supporting and subsidising that tournament for a long time. MLS have another argument about fixture congestion. For example, last season, LAFC played a record 53 games, travelled 63,000 miles in the process. But I will say, IP cannot be everything in modern football. The game cannot be torn from its roots. Hence the initial backlash from MLS fans towards their own teams was severe back in December when MLS tried to pull out of the US Open Cup in its entirety. The idea of just fielding their MLS Next Pro sides across the entire league was ultimately rejected by US Soccer. But now the US Open Cup has been thrown into limbo, caught in the tug of war, the balance of power, the fight between MLS and US Soccer Federation, the game within the game here in the United States. But I'd say this, football in the United States is poised to soar. And the one thing that we cannot put a price on in this moment is our history. It's the most priceless thing of all. The US Open Cup, it is an alternate way of telling the entire story of the men's game, generation to generation in our nation, a lifeline back to the very beginning. That's its wonder, its unique wonder. There is nothing else like it, and there cannot be. Just as there's nothing like the chance for a team like second tier Sacramento Republic to make the final in 2022. Just a delirious Cinderella dance that caught the imagination of a nation as they beat 3 MLS teams along the way. Yes, this jewel has been left to tarnish, to atrophy, to rust. It was hard to hear in all the recent unseemly brouhaha. Open Cup Committee Chairman Arthur Matson stepped down and tell us how dire it was. He said the tournament was in, quote, grave danger. So I'll leave you with this. The official full name of the competition is the Lamar Hunt US Open Cup. And Lamar Hunt, NFL fans know that name so well. He was born to an oil wildcat, a billionaire in El Dorado, Arkansas, back in 1932. He's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, the National Soccer Hall of Fame, and the International Tennis Hall of Fame. That man loves Hall of Fames. And at one point, he owned 3 MLS teams, pretty much keeping the league afloat. He's also credited as the man who coined the term Super Bowl, naming it after the Super Bowl his kids were once playing with before his very eyes. And back in the 1920s, our US Open Cup, that was our Super Bowl. It was attracting 5-figure attendances in person. It was the biggest thing in the nation, the buoyant height of our early soccer history. May that past be the US Open Cup's future again. May sanity prevail. May the cup rise. It is worth so much more than the decayed state we've let it erode into. I think everyone agrees. And I'm not alone in saying this. It was fascinating to see my friend Jim Curtin, the Philadelphia Union manager. He was asked over the weekend for his views on the matter. And he said, "You guys know my love for the competition. It's a great one. I don't think the solution that comes out for this season will be necessarily the solution forever." When I heard that, I thought, oh, Lord Jim, may that be true. May sense prevail. May self-interest be defined for all parties so that this jewel of our nation's sporting history does not get swallowed into the power battles that are sweeping up our game. And may the US Open Cup soar once again. Keep the US Open Cup weird.